Hello and welcome back to our course in rhetorical theory. Let's talk today about perhaps one of my favorite aspects of studying rhetoric, a part that I've enjoyed the most and been the most fascinated with as I have wandered through this interesting landscape of persuasion and influence. And that would be what we could simply call the power of eloquence. Really? You mean just the way something is said can give it power? I think all of you know that, right? Yes, it is. And it's a very fascinating psychological concept from one perspective, or perhaps it's just an intuitive artistic concept for another. I'll let you decide. Let's dive into this. I want to do just a bit of review to get started, and then we'll start discussing the elements of eloquence. Okay, you recall from one of our early lectures the idea of orality, and here we have Homer. Well, there's Homer Simpson. He's not very articulate, not necessarily a good storyteller. He's our society's buffoon, but there was the other Homer in Greek society who was probably a pretty amazing person. And what happened, this statement here, oral forms of thought and expression, they evolved into what we call today rhetorical figuration. If you recall those oral forms of thought and expression, they were a way of composing orature, not literature, in a way that made them memorable and also made them artistic, interesting, enjoyable, pleasurable to listen to. We take pleasure from good oral discourse, from a well-told story. There's the pleasure of the story itself, but just also of the skill of the storyteller, pausing at just the right moment to build suspense, raising the voice, lowering the voice, doing different voices. All of this works together to form a whole something that, well, let's just call it rhetorical in this sense here. And I briefly mentioned these different forms of rhetorical figuration. I finally found my book that I mentioned, 60 Ways to Turn a Phrase. So yes, 60 different forms of rhetorical figuration are out there, written down, ready for you to put into use in your writing and in your speaking. We'll talk about these here and a couple of more, maybe just one more. But I think we'll have an assignment this week that looks at these orality vestiges, if you will, rhetorical figuration. Just quickly then here, anaphora is one. It's a repetition of a word or phrase at the beginning of successive phrases, clauses, or lines. Quote from Barbara Jordan, senator at one point, I can't remember, this was probably from the 80s. We are a people in a quandary about the present. We are a people in search of our future. We are a people in search of a national community. You notice there's another one mixed in here, the present, the future. Two different elements of time are worked in, but the key phrase, we are a people. We can see antithesis. This is probably the most common form of figuration used. And it's just simply holding up two ideas for comparison. Often they directly contrast with one another, or they are opposites with one another. Antithesis, the truth, the thesis, or the antithesis. And not necessarily false in the true one here, but two opposite ideas that they can't both be happening. One of them is to be rejected. And that's why antithesis is so often used. If you can hold up an antithesis and show that the thesis is flawed compared to that one, then we must reject the other. Well, that's how humans think, because we have two hands. But really, there might be 3 or 4 different choices to be made about any one situation. But here it's used just in more of a poetic way. Lincoln said this in, I believe, the Gettysburg Address. The world will little note nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. There's a second antithesis worked in, that antithesis between saying and doing. You know, yeah, it's easy to say something, but to do something or to give your life in this cause, that's what he's contrasting here as well. So, and actually it's Lincoln whose words we probably have remembered, ironically, the longest, and forget about what actually happened on that day at Gettysburg. The horror of the battle, just the sheer loss of human life, the brutality of all of it. We don't like to remember those things, but we do like to remember these ideas 77 years ago. Okay, our next one here, got three of them. Climax. The arrangement of words and phrases or clauses in order of ascending power. Often the last emphatic word in one phrase or clause is repeated as the first emphatic word of the next. This one's from Martin Luther King. He's talking about the marches that they're doing and the social, just kind of upsetting the apple cart. We're not wrong. We're not wrong in what we're doing. If we are wrong, then the Supreme Court of this nation is wrong. If we are wrong, the Constitution of the United States is wrong. If we are wrong, God Almighty is wrong. Yeah, he's starting up pretty high there with the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court agrees with what they're doing. The Constitution backs them up, and God is on their side as well. Very powerful way to say it, though. Much more powerful than what I just mumbled out in front of you. Chiasmus is a form of antithesis. Let me get my pronunciation correct. You just reverse the order of the words. Makes it a little more poetic. Maybe a little more memorable as well. Jesus said, "But many who are first shall be last, and the last shall be first." Metaphor. This is simple. You're familiar with metaphors. And often these are not worked in with formulaic patterns of wording. The metaphor is just, it's a visual. It's something that jumps out at you, that you can see it, you can hear it, whatever. And he uses a kind of an oral metaphor here. Again, Martin Luther King. He used a lot of rhetorical figuration in all his speeches. With this faith, we will be able to transform the jangling discords of our nation into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. The jangling discords into a beautiful symphony. A change is happening here. Also antithesis, the jangling discord or the beautiful symphony. And so you can work these, usually two rhetorical figures in one phrase. Probably about all that you want to do. You know, there's such a thing as overpainting when you do a work of art. Let me pull one down here off the wall here in my office. And we've got a painting here. And it's got a fairly wide mat around it. Give it some white space around there so you can appreciate the beauty of the painting. And we've got a tree that is painted in detail with the detail of the shadows of its own branches crisscrossing it. And behind it, the background just kind of gets mushy and not faded, but just blurry a little bit, and very little detail in the foreground, a few blades of grass up front. Yeah, good art. You put the work into, you emphasize what you want to have seen, and you de-emphasize that which is around it. So the same principle holds true with language. Don't overdo it. Don't pour it on too thick and heavy with this kind of rhetorical figuration, because it's like doing a painting that just has too much happening in it, and every little bit of the painting is full of busyness, and you lose the essence of the art. And that's a mistake a lot of very good technical painters make. Too much detail throughout the entire painting. And the best artists, the detail is used selectively and effectively. All right, the quality of your voice is also an element of eloquence. And within the human voice, there's a lot of different parts of your body that vibrate. We call these resonators. They are what make the sound actually that gets put out there that we all hear. Resonators, and everybody's body has different acoustic properties. Just like nearly every guitar you pick up and play and strum will have a slightly, subtly different tone. The higher quality wood has a richer tone. I say higher quality, certain types of wood, the German spruce, rosewood is very nice. But they have a different tone, and a cheap guitar uses a cheaper kind of wood that just doesn't vibrate as well. The thickness of the wood makes a difference. The luthiers that make guitars or a violin even change the thickness of the front face. It vibrates, and they shape it and make it thicker and thinner in different places to get it to vibrate in just the way they want. Well, our body is just that unique, and everybody's voice has a unique sound. And as you develop your voice and learn to speak and learn to be eloquent, you are practicing with these. You're bringing the full effect out as best as you can. Well, even as I'm speaking here, I can feel that my throat's a little dry. I had an allergic reaction about an hour ago. I've been coughing, and my vocal cords are probably have a bit of mucus coating them, whatever dust is in the air that's causing me trouble. And so these kind of things work against that beautiful sound out of your voice. But then there's your speech rate. How fast are you talking? You're really going to speed up, and can people keep up with you when you talk this fast? Or are you just going too slow and boring everybody with the way you're talking? You have to pick just the right rate as you speak. The pitch of your voice. My pitch feels a little higher today because of the way my throat's feeling. But if I can cough this out, slow down, try to get my resonators working a little bit better, give you a deeper pitch, sounds better with my voice than the higher pitch does. Your pitch always needs to be right in your comfortable range for you to sound your best. If you stretch it too low and try to speak really low like this, it starts to sound fake. If I speak too high like this, I just don't think it sounds as good. Other voices sound fabulous when they're up in that higher range. It just depends on you. How loud are you going to speak? We vary our volume. We can get real quiet and force you to lean in to listen more closely, or then we can start blasting at you and get really loud with it. And also your accent. You know, that southern accent I kind of picked up living down in Memphis. And it never got me in too much trouble when I tried to use it. That's because I didn't very often, actually. It wasn't natural for me, and so if you're from the South, forgive me for my lousy southern accent. Accents are very regional. I knew a professor who could call where you were from in the South, listening to your accent when I went to school there. But I think it's that British accent that they speak a little bit slower. They pronounce their words, and I'm not doing it very well here. Watch these nature documentaries where they got the British narrator, and somehow that British accent within the English language just has a very respectable quality about it. And how can you say you're wrong? Because the accent of your voice is so, it's just right. Well, that's the problem with eloquence here. Some very eloquent people can be wrong about things. So eloquence, we could call this the quality of your voice and the ability to speak articulately, either just saying things with the right words, using the right phrases, calling things by the right name, using adverbs and adjectives to bring color and vividness and action to your speaking. Also with the poetic wording, either built in to structure, like rhetorical figuration, or making a rhyme all the time. You know, that gets a little cheesy though, doesn't it? Got to watch out for too much rhyming, too much metering. And it sounds best when it's natural speech, and that's why we've gravitated towards rhetorical figuration. But I would call that a form of poetry as well. So, what makes it so powerful to hear a very eloquent speaker and you're just drawn in, and this person has to be right? I agree. Well, the best explanation I've found of this isn't from a psychologist. It's not even from a rhetoric professor, though I know this author I'm about to quote studied rhetoric very closely throughout his education and was very familiar with it. And because it was, you know, part of the trivium, the basic education for educated people from the times of ancient Greece up until really just the last century when the sciences kind of took over. So this author was J.R.R. Tolkien, and this is from the Lord of the Rings, from the book, and it's a chapter called The Voice of Saruman. And the section is actually found exactly in the middle of, I think, the entire trilogy when they get there. It's very interesting that he placed it at this section. And here was the most powerful wizard in Middle Earth, and what was his power? And that's what they're talking about here. Tolkien writes, "Suddenly another voice spoke, low and melodious, its very sound an enchantment, and those who listened unwarily to that voice could seldom report the words that they heard. Mostly they remembered that it was a delight to hear the voice speaking. All that it said seemed wise and reasonable, and desire awoke in them by swift agreement to seem wise and reasonable themselves." He's captured something here. Desire awoke within each listener. It's a collective thing happening because the same effect is being placed upon everybody at the same time, and they are responding in the same way. Desire is awakened by swift agreement. It happened quickly, and nods of heads going on all around, and I'm going to be part of the crowd here. I'm not going to go against the crowd. You know, that's part of human nature. And all of it was to seem wise themselves. Because if I'm disagreeing with this beautiful melodious voice and everything seems wise, and I'm going to be the one person disagreeing, no, I'm also moved by that voice. And so all of us together, we want to all seem wise because we believe it. Because if you don't believe what it's saying, clearly you're not wise. There's a little twisted logic that's going on here. And that's why Tolkien worked in those who listened unwarily. And that's where you have to resist the power of the eloquence of a voice and be wary by listening to the logic of the arguments that are being stated, looking at the credibility of the person, their background, their prior history with your community. All of that plays into this power of eloquence that is really expressed through the voice. Well, that was Tolkien, you know, that kind of thing really doesn't happen much today, does it? Wait a minute, we got Peter Jennings here. Have you ever listened to him? He's got a great voice. He's sitting there, he's wearing his suit and his tie, looking all professional, and everything is perfect. And when he tells you the news, it's got to be true. I don't want to look stupid in front of all these people, so I'm going to nod my head in agreement with everything the newscaster says. Every newscaster in this country is a good-looking person. They dress sharply, and every word is scripted out by their writers. He's really just a good voice actor. He has a good voice. Yeah, he's smart. He has a good vocabulary. He may help write his own stories as well. I don't know. but just a beautiful voice on television talking to us. Radio announcers, we get the same thing. We never even see the radio personality. So, yeah, they appear there. I wonder if they're anywhere else. Here's one. I knew as soon as this guy spoke at the Democratic National Convention he was going to win the presidency. 4 years later, he did. He has a beautiful voice. He has good control of it. God forbid that his teleprompter crashes. I think Peter Jennings could pull it off if the teleprompter crashed. Obama, that happened once or twice, and he becomes very inarticulate at that point. But if he's got the teleprompter, the guy was a great actor, delivering truth to us in that voice. That, how do you disagree? It just sounds so good. The final concept I want to put out here is more of the existential, theoretical aspect of this, if you want. It's just a line of poetry from William Keats, from a poem called Ode on a Grecian Urn. This is the kind of urn they're talking about. It's the last line of the poem. It's a short poem. Beauty is truth, truth beauty. That is all ye need, all ye know on earth, and all ye need to know. He's really said there this connection between beauty and truth that is so strong. It's the power of eloquence is what happens there. And we believe it. It's beautiful. It has to be good. It has to be right, because we humans associate ugly things with evil, with deception, with somebody taking advantage of you. But when that salesman just has the wonderful voice, who's articulate about their product, dressed in a nice suit, and starts giving you their practiced lines of sales, their logical arguments for why you need to buy this now, and here you are unwarily listening and taking it in, and where do I sign? I want the car. Be wary out there. Eloquence is very persuasive, even when credibility could be a question, or even when credibility is not a question, just the rightness of what is being said, the truthfulness, upon examination by a wary listener, logically starts to break down, and we have a problem, Houston. So beware of that. Eloquence is persuasive, and when you combine that eloquence with some of these rhetorical strategies we've been talking about with neo-sophism, and I found another reading I want to send out to you on that one before this course is over, with the logos, pathos, ethos all working together with the right level of argumentation, with especially the motivational aspect of raising up somebody's passion. Wow, this stuff gets powerful, and it's why I wanted to study it, why I wanted to understand how it all works. I've been taken in too many times, and still have to be wary. Every time I read the internet, turn on the news, listen to somebody, even listen to some of my colleagues that are pretty darn eloquent, but that wariness in me listens to the logic through all that. And just like the a fly-by-night school that's going to teach you how to do something to get rich, beware. The logic's got to be there. The evidence has to be there. Show me the results. That's what helps us to not be taken in by the power of eloquence here. All right, thanks a lot for listening, and we'll talk to you in our next lecture.